Hi, I'm Stu Kagan. Welcome to Born Scrappy, the podcast for scrap metal exporters and traders. Join me in conversation with some of the most experienced traders and operators that have helped shape this incredible industry. In today's episode, we're joined by Jurgen Van Gorp. Jurgen has been in the metals industry for 23 years and is one of the most experienced buyers of copper scrap in the world. He currently holds the position of portfolio manager of raw material for the giant Aurubis Group. He's also a member of the Non-Ferrous Board of the BIR and is an active speaker and panelist at various recycling conferences globally. He has his master's degree in international politics and a degree in business communication. I've known Jurgen for over 15 years and he's one of my favorite guys to trade with and chat to. Let's jump into the episode and hear more. But first, intro. Hi, Jurgen. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Stuart?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. It's late at night here in New Zealand. You're in Belgium at the moment, right?
Yes, I'm in Antwerp, so here it's noon, officially lunch time. But I skipped lunch simply to be here with you.
You're too good to me, mate. You always have been, Jurgen. Thank you so much.
Eh?
Jurgen, it's great to have you a part of the Born Scrappy podcast. We're really excited to have you on, introduce you to the listeners and those that you haven't met before and get to know you a little bit better. I think you've been on quite a journey and you've bought a lot of tons in your life and handled some huge, huge volumes. So we're excited to hear more about that. So thanks for being here, Jurgen.
No problem, my pleasure.
Jürgen, to kick it off, I believe that we learn mainly from the toughest periods in our lives. We learn from mistakes that we make. We learn from having to get through obstacles that we face. Can you think of any tough trades that you've had to deal with in the past and what you learned from that?
Definitely. I think my toughest trade was actually my first deal. Try to open a door with literally my first supplier. That was, I think, now 23 years ago, where I had just started working for a company called, at the time it was Metallochimique. And after a training of 1 month, they gave me keys to a car, roadmap, because there was no GPS yet at that time. It was all with an atlas, a roadmap of France. So I drove to the northern part of France, and there was this one supplier, Mr. Seculac, from the company called Gosselin Durier, which is no longer around. But he was a well-established supplier in the northern part of France, and he was just literally having a ball with me. I was this freshman. My French was like Belgian school French, and he was very proud French, always making fun with my French language, my Belgian accent, my Belgian French words, because there are some differences. And the entire time he would take me on the yard and we would tour. He would show me his materials. He was always nice, but always like kind of making fun with me. And at the end of the tour, it was always the same. Well, I think you're not ready yet. I'm not going to sell you material. And then this went on for a while. He started complaining about his back. So his back hurted. And he was saying, like, yeah, Jurgen, I've been playing tennis. So I think at that point he was like well in his 60s. I have been playing tennis all weekend long. And I've been playing with guys like you. I beat them all. No one can beat me with tennis. And I simply answered to him, well, I understand because you had a subscription to a tennis club for amateurs. And he started like really looking at me, and he called in his assistant. And then he literally said, like, I think it's time to sell some material to Jurgen because now he finally understands how it works. He knows how to speak proper French. He knows how to come back with like catchwords and phrases. And Jurgen, let's do a tour and I'll sell you some material. And that actually was my first deal. I got the door open, but that was the start. So I got into my car, I called in the deal, they booked the contract, but then actually immediately the issue arises. The market, it was a load of, let's say, 10 metric tons of old zinc scrap. The market had dropped the moment that he delivers. What happens? He delivers 20 metric tons just to test me.
Of
So
course.
he
What you
called me,
do?
hey, Jurgen, we only have a contract for 10 metric tons. They are not willing to unload the additional 10 metric tons because of a lack of a contract. You're not going to leave me here hanging. You have to accept it at the same price. You know how it goes.
Yes.
And basically, I was there, and my former boss, he was sitting right next to me and he was overhearing the conversation and he was like, don't give in, don't give in, don't give in. While he was like pushing me, like, Jurgen, come on, this is our first deal together. You don't want to have this as a start on your resume because I know people in the market and whatnot. And I simply stood my ground. We renegotiated the second half of the truck load. We got an agreement and fine. And actually, since then, word started to travel around, and other French suppliers, when I arrived at their yard, they started looking at me differently. And they all started to give me like a first shot at their material. And I started to buy scrap. And that's probably one of my biggest or most toughest deals. Actually, the first one that I ever did. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much in that, right? I mean, I love that you used humor to break through eventually. I think we're all so nervous when we start trading. It's the same with the sales team, right? You go out and see customers for the first time, and we all get so nervous. But as soon as you feel a little bit more comfortable, you can actually let your personality come out. And when that happens and you bring in a bit of humor and your personality, often you find that it breaks the ice and can definitely soften your clients and soften the other side. And often it can lead to a really good relationship in the future as well. That's really cool. For those people that don't know the size of Metalo Shamik, the company that you were buying for, what sort of volumes were you guys trading? I remember visiting you in Belgium and I had a great time. And I remember seeing the piles of copper, and I used to think that's like the size of my steel piles in South Africa. What sort of volumes were you guys doing?
Let's say when I started working for Metallochimique, the company has gone through a couple of changes in the course of the 23 years. So our business model also has changed. I'm going to say the deal that I'm talking about, it was really in the beginning where we were buying a lot of copper and tin lead materials, but we were still trading a lot of other non-ferrous qualities, cables like insulated copper wire, zinc, motors, stuff like that. But after 3 years and a half, we had a huge reorganization where a lot of the refiners in Europe were under pressure, mainly because of the Asian competition. So we had to review our business model. And at that point in time, we decided to get rid of all the trading activities not related to the two smelting operations that we had in Belgium and Spain. And since then, our focus has always been copper tin lead refining. And then we would process on a monthly basis, for instance, in the Belgian plant, between 25,000 tons per month, all related to scrap and byproducts, and then mainly the complex materials. Yep.
Yeah, I remember you had a pile of about that sitting outside, and I remember comparing it to a bulk load that I would do of 30,000 tons of ferrous. And it was a different world when I came to visit you there that time. So it's good for us to understand what sort of volumes you've been through or
Since
handled
then, we
yourself.
have grown as well because, let's say, roughly 3 years ago, we were taken over by Aurubis Group. Today, we no longer run two plants, but we run six plants. We're in the process of setting up a seventh facility in the North American market. So our volumes and also the materials that we're interested in have changed a lot. Today, I
Mm,
would say that we are a giant on copper bearing materials, e-scrap, circuit boards, precious
yeah.
metals, of course, tin lead materials. That remains on our roster as well, but predominantly complex materials.
Mm, mm. And do you still buy everything based on a formula? I remember you previously did, well, we always sold to you based on a formula. Is that still how you work, or do you fix prices?
I'm going to say that it's a bit of a mix depending on the quality that we buy, depending on the geographical location where we buy from, depending on the supplier's requirements. Let's say the last couple of years with the copper market, for instance, being very unpredictable, of course, it's much more difficult to give as is pricing far away from home. The risk is too high. So typically that becomes a formula. However, when we look at materials like industrial residues, slags, skimmings, drosses, we've always
Mm,
been buying that on a formula basis, regardless of the material being generated in Belgium, close to home, or let's say generated in New Zealand, Australia, which
mm,
is
mm.
much further away from home.
Of course.
We always will buy on a formula basis there. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Have there been in your career any tough decisions that you've had to make? Whether it's deciding to stop buying from a certain market or moving into different commodities or whatever it might be? Have there been any decisions that you've had to make, and did you learn anything from those?
There have been, like in the 23 years that I've been active in the recycling industry, there have been plenty of moments where you have to make and take a difficult decision. The period where I had to make the most of those decisions were actually the period where I was literally developing the US market from scratch. When I started, we only had one supplier, and basically I created and developed the market to what it is today. On the copper side, I had a colleague who was doing the same thing on the tin side, but Metallo, let's say, had the idea. We are an international company, but let's say our mindset was mainly focused on like Western Europe. Our setup was for Western Europe. However, when I was in the US, there was a time zone difference. Everybody that I could contact for advice was already at home. I was visiting suppliers, I was visiting foundries, I was visiting mills. I was then in my backpack, I had maybe at best 3.5, 4 years of experience. And all of a sudden, I have to develop complex materials, which in the French market, where I was actually coming from, there was not that much of those types of materials around. So my experience actually was buying
Mm.
mixed copper, buying alloys, and buying some trading items. And then all of a sudden, I had to visit mills, and they put me in front of a pile of slags, drosses, skimmings, and
You got to price it and
I
grade it.
had to set up a pricing schedule for that. And as I said, because of the time zone difference, I really had to base myself off gut feeling, trying to
Mm.
figure out what are the real needs of my counterpart, what are their expectations, and how do I go home with a deal in my pocket.
Mm.
And a lot of that was gut feeling, trying to read the people that I was talking to, and simply afterwards, when I left the facility, be critical for myself and literally dissect the conversation. Like, where did I drop a ball? If I felt like I did something wrong, how did they play? So I was sometimes Metallo send me out just one person. I was put into a room with sometimes two, three, four people, and they were all like bouncing off each other. Whereas I had to do it on my own, and
Yeah.
I'm not an English native speaker. That was also a disadvantage. So in my head, while they were talking in their native language, I continuously have to shift quicker and basically do the translation, think about the words, which English word is this? But how shall I do this in my price setting? How do I sound or how can I speak with confidence, knowing that with some of the materials I actually had almost no experience? And how can I create this image that I really know what I'm talking about without doing too much damage when the material would arrive, let's say 4 weeks after completing the deal, and then having someone from quality or someone from the art on the phone like, hey Jurgen, what did you buy? This is a pile of crap. I think one of the things that helped me was that simply being critical, really listening and using the advice of some of my peers in the market, but also I got a lot of support from some of the technical staff at Metallo, and basically put all elements together and make it work. And luckily, when I took those decisions, I'm going to say, okay, when you speak about damage or did you make a bad deal? Of course, did I make bad deals, but not that relationships got hurt or that we
Mm.
suffered from it for years. That's not the case. There's a learning curve. And I think I simply was able to use that learning momentum well by listening to people, by listening to my own gut feeling, because I think that is important when you're sitting down with people and there's no one that you can, how do you call it, like with these television shows, sometimes you can call a helpline.
Phone a
There was no
friend.
one.
Phone a friend.
Yes, there was no one like
There's
that
no
because of
phone and
the
no
time
friend.
zone difference. All my colleagues were at home, so I was really out there by myself, and I like to believe that I did let's say, a fairly good job there. So
Mm.
yeah.
It's quite interesting. You said when you'd finish those sort of roles or that task, you would assess yourself and be, how did I do? And did I do the right deal? And could I have done it better? Those sort of things are really important to be able to grow, even in life, let alone your career. To be able to take a step back and say, did I do that all well? What can I do better next time? And if you every single time get that little bit better, you're 23 years down the line now, you're exceptionally better than you were 23 years ago just by assessing your performance each time.
I hope so. And I hope
Yeah.
that some of my suppliers will say the same thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
no,
yeah. You also made mention of when your operations or your yard would call you. You didn't want them to call you and say, "What did you buy? What did you have delivered?" I still remember a couple calls that you would phone to me when I was trading in South Africa, and we had 85 yards throughout Southern Africa, and I couldn't see everything that was loaded. And you would every now and then phone me and say, "Oh, I've just been phoned from operations, and they're shouting at me because I bought from you. And what did you deliver me?" And and then I'd be on the phone to my yard, and
yeah.
you and I would be in the middle and be hearing it from the one yard and phoning the other yard. So I know exactly what you meant when you said you didn't want to receive those phone calls.
No, the thing is that as long as you can limit that, then I think you're doing a
Mm,
great job. But of
mm,
course, when you are at the beginning of your learning curve, it's not that you can get a free pass, but the thing is that it is best simply to not think that you have all wisdom already inside of
mm,
you, but
mm.
listen to what people tell you. And I must say
Yeah.
that I have been very fortunate, like in the office where we were working off, because of a lack of space, we were sitting very close to each other. You could overhear phone calls. I could listen to my older colleagues with much more experience, how they would do negotiations over the phone. I have been very fortunate that in the market, some, I'm going to say, at that point in time, definitely more established contacts. They liked me. They took me under their wings. They taught me things that probably could I figured it out myself. Yes, but
Mm,
it would have taken me much longer. And I think that is a big advantage when you
mm,
have tools like that available to you. But of course, you have to be able to see those opportunities because it's not given. It doesn't come from the start. You have to work for it. You have to put in the effort and you have to reach to such platforms where people basically decide for themselves, well, I'm going to take Stuart under my wings. Even though
mm.
maybe it doesn't benefit me, but still I like him. I'm going to teach him something or I'm going to give him some information or whatnot. And to get to such platforms, it's a combination of your own personality, your own style, and the willingness to put in the effort to get there.
Yeah, and I think it's double sided. The mentor and the mentee. I think we all needed mentors. I've had some incredible mentors in my life that I wouldn't have learned as much as I did without them. And you've just spoken about the ones that you've had too. But at the same time, when we've spent 25, 23 years in the industry, it's also still important for us to now look at the next generation coming
Correct.
through and see how we can help and guide them through their mistakes because they must make mistakes and that's how they will learn just how we did, but we can assure them that everything will be okay because this is your learning period right
But it's always funny when a mistake happens with someone who is younger in experience that you can always have this joke, yeah, but it never happened to me. So
now.
it's the first time that I see something like this, and you can
Yes,
be a
yes,
little
yes.
bit of a, let's say, a bully, but more like in a friendly way, just to push them a little bit.
More like an
Uh,
older brother. Like an older
that's
brother, you can have a dig at them. Absolutely. No,
no,
I love that.
no.
So, Jürgen, we spoke about some of your tougher decisions and tougher trades that you've had to make. What sort of highlights have you had in your career? I know you're nowhere near done and you're still very young and you've got a lot longer to go, but so far, have there been any highlights in your career?
Oh, I was actually already thinking about retirement, Stuart.
You're going to go back to DJing
Well,
or rodeo.
DJing and then basically surfing waves all over the world.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. So when I would retire, I have plenty of opportunities to basically kill time in a good manner.
Mm,
But no, when it comes down to highlights, of course, my career has only been like 23 years, but there are several highlights that I can think of. One that is still close to my heart is actually my first deal that I did in the US market
nice.
with a lady called Andrea Woods. She was the first person in the US market to actually give me a break. and she sold me some material. And for me, that was the start of actually my international career path, because when I started going to the US market, by going to the meetings over there, like the ISRI meetings, National Convention, roundtables, you come across people from South Africa, you come across people from Australia, New Zealand, other markets. And at that point in time, I was not limited to the US market. So I started to speak with Mexican contacts and opened the Mexican market for the company. I opened the Japanese market. I opened the Australian market, the New Zealand market. I progressed and developed further the South African market. I came up with accounts in the South American market. And for me, so that would be a highlight, that first deal. But the one that I really look back at with a lot of pleasure was actually the supplier event that we organized in Budapest in the course of the BIR in Budapest. At that time, our commercial team was probably running like a well-oiled machine. We had been tweaking and fine-tuning our way of working for a couple of years. Initially, we had two teams. We made one team out of it, and we tweaked our modus operandi. And in the beginning, there was a lot of skepsis, but one hurdle after the other and one little win after the other, and all of a sudden we were running at full speed. There was a lot of support out of the market for the commercial team, and we celebrated this with this supplier event. And I must say that that is something that I still look at with a lot of pleasure. How we stood there as a team together with our suppliers, enjoying the beauty of Budapest on the river at night. For me, that's
That's
probably one
amazing.
of the nicer things or events that I can think of. Yep,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
yep.
Sounds great.
Also speaking
Sorry,
in Los
sorry I
Angeles.
missed it. Sorry I missed it or wasn't invited. That's fine.
But I
Thanks
think
though.
you simply were not present, Stuart. Otherwise, you would have had
Uh,
an invite. No worries, no worries.
yeah.
No, and then
Thanks.
another one, but that I see more like a personal victory. That was when I was invited to be part of the ISRI panel at the National Convention in Los Angeles. Just getting on stage there, I had never spoken for such a large audience. So the best way to kick off was with a little joke about my own country, and I felt like a stand-up comedian, like Eddie Murphy, but then more in a nicer way. But that was more like a personal, how do you say it, victory. I'd never done that,
Yeah, that's
and it
awesome.
went well. So yeah.
I remember it. I was in LA. I actually missed your talk, but I was in LA
I'll
and
see,
I
but even
remember.
if I would have invited you, you don't show up.
Oh,
So
you see, I actually the night you arrived, we actually met for a beer
yep, I
in
know.
LA. So
Yep.
yeah, I was there, but sorry I missed your talk. But
No.
that's getting you back for not being invited to Budapest. Um,
Okay. I'm glad we can
no,
straighten this out. And
exactly. With regards to on the trading side, you buy some on fixed terms, you buy some on future terms. What do you think is the best advice you could give traders or owner operators, processors regarding their strategy for trading? Are there any tips that you can give?
I think it's for the lack of a better word, and I'm not sure if I'm using the right English expression, but I might beat a dead horse with saying this. But when I started in France, I had a phone conversation with an old, I think it was a commercial director of an old foundry, which is no longer in existence. And we were talking, and as an advice, he said, like, Jurgen, you're a young bull. I'm going to give you this piece of advice. Greed is a killer.
Mm,
And it's an advice that has stuck to me for the last 23 years. I think
mm.
it's an advice that probably often people will give to each other, especially in the trade. But I really like that expression. And the other one, but I'm not sure if that is common, but it's a saying that we use in Belgium. It's like you will always meet the same person twice in life, meaning it's best to stay polite, courteous, respectful, because you never know when you run into that same person again. And maybe as a some advice that this could
Yeah, that I
be
mean
given.
that's brilliant. I think to me, the idea that both parties, and I've mentioned this before, but both parties should win on every trade is very important. And I think the more people I speak to, the more people relay that same message that, treat people well. It's exactly what you're saying. Treat people well. You never know when you're going to run into them again. And when you're in trading and when you're trying to sell, you're expecting to run into people again and again and again. So if you're going to try and push and be greedy, that's short-term gains. You
Hmm.
could win something for a short period. You might win on one trade, but in the long term, that buyer, if they were strong, you're not going to be able to sell to them anymore. They're not going to want to do business with you. So yeah, I think both of those sayings you used are really brilliant. So thanks
But
for
when
that,
you,
Jurgen.
let's say, Stuart, when you refer to it has to be a win for both parties, what I came to understand is it has to be a win-win for both parties, not necessarily every deal, but like my interest, and that has always been my philosophy or my approach of the business. My focus is always long term,
Mm,
and a relationship needs to be a win-win on the long term,
mhm,
meaning that throughout, let's say, if you look at on a yearly basis, say you do 6 deals together. Not every It cannot always be the case because market circumstances change, materials can change. And of those 6 deals, maybe there are periods where it's more in my favor. So the win is bigger on
mm,
my end.
mhm.
And I'd like to believe that if you have a good, solid relationship, your counterpart will understand that it's not up to him or his to also push for a big win. But
Yeah.
they understand that, okay, now it's up to you, Jurgen. But next deal, situation could have changed, and I have to
Mm,
accept a smaller win, let's say,
yeah.
but that the
Yeah.
big win is on the other side. However, we continue doing business, and if you look at the 6 deals, the win-win should be fairly equal.
Mm.
And that is, I think, how
You,
I would like to see it.
you make a very valid point because traders at their heart are competitive.
Mhm.
We're hungry, we're motivated, we're always pushing. So of course there will be the push to get a better deal at all times. And I agree with you. Certain times one party will feel like they've won more than the others, but I think you're spot on because it's more about that general feeling of when I deal with Jurgen, I know that he might win today, but I will win tomorrow, and he will allow that to happen, and that will happen in time, and it will swing in roundabouts.
Yep,
Whereas if you feel that every time you deal with one person, that person pushes you so hard that there's no margin or whatever it is, that you leave with a horrible feeling, you just won't deal with that person in the long run.
correct.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's 100% right. Um, Tell me, with regards to exporters, what you bought from many. I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't even know that it ends up with you most of the time. You buy from some of the largest traders around the world, some of the largest scrap dealers around the world as well. A lot of people supply these people and don't realize that their material is actually ending up at you. So, what advice could you give for these guys selling the material in order to make them what you would consider a preferred supplier? Right? You would have, no matter what it is, you would have certain suppliers that you prefer to buy from because you know the quality is going to be good. Whatever else it might be, it's a good relationship, and the dealing is actually good. The paperwork, the administration, whatever it might be, everything goes really smoothly. So they're your preferred supplier. What are those things that people can do
I think it's always important to basically know your counterpart. Who are you dealing with, and spend some time like investigating a little
better?
bit. Like, who am I really selling to? Given the value of some of the qualities, I think that is more relevant today than maybe it was, let's say, 20 years ago when the markets were like much,
Mm,
much, much lower. That is important. And always try to understand what is their end game. Because at the end of the day, the way the world is evolving and progressing, there is this request for more sustainability. The chance that people will hold you accountable for certain dealings is much bigger. So you need to understand, where am I actually shipping into and what is happening with my material. Do I ship materials into a company that basically one portion goes into a furnace, the other portion ends up in the country? you have to figure out if that is important for you. Yes, no. I think today it is important because there are too many people watching over our shoulders, and I think nobody wants to have some sort of complaint about that. And okay, the initial numbers that people put in front of you might, like as a trader, you want to sell and sell as quickly as possible. But okay, what looks like a lucrative deal can basically bite you in the ass, if I can use that expression, after a couple of weeks, when the
Yeah.
material arrives or whatnot. And these are not like new tips, but I think most people that have been around have had these experiences. And well, simply try to do your homework. It starts with that, actually, and always try to figure out what is their end game and what is the actual need of the counterpart.
So that's really good also when looking for new buyers. So that's really important. Absolutely. Um,
Yeah, when I did it, Stuart, I've developed a great variety of countries. I've worked in different cultures, suppliers, materials per supplier. But the thing is always when you start, you always have to keep in mind that you already have built a certain supplier network. And when you are a buyer, you want to buy. But sometimes you will run into yourself because you can only buy one material once, not twice. And when you add or take on or onboard new suppliers, I've always taken into account, is this healthy for what I already built up? Is it jeopardizing my long-term interests via suppliers that have been selling to us for a certain while? Has it added value, or is it jeopardizing? And in essence, when it's hurtful to the supplier network that I would have built, then I likely will turn down the potential to buy, because I will open up a box of Pandora afterwards with suppliers that have been selling to me through thick and thin, or like for better or for worse. Maybe that's a
yeah.
better
Yeah.
expression. So would I walk away from short-term opportunities? No. However, they cannot erode or jeopardize my long-term strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Jürgen. Over your 23 years, have you seen much change in the industry?
I've seen a lot of changes actually. When I started in the industry, that was at a period where everybody was closing down their chopping equipment. Foundries went out of business, mills closed down production, they shortened capacity, whatnot. Then after a couple of years, then came this trend of consolidation on the scrap yards, but also in the industry. There has been a lot of technical innovation, and the last couple of years, you see this cycle coming back with everybody investing in, or people continue to invest in shopping equipment. You see investments in foundries again, new refineries pop up all over the world. So things
Yeah.
change, and then also the way how we do business with each other has also changed. You have all these social media platforms that are being used. LinkedIn is there. Just digitalization in general has become a something that we have to keep in mind. It's already here, and I don't think it will be erased anytime soon. So it will only progress in time. And I think that will, together with the level of consolidation, I think those two trends, okay, so because of society changing, rules and regulations, there's this cry for, and it's a sound cry, which I support, for more sustainability, which all impact our business today, how we operate, how we can operate, how we change our operations or operational behavior. So yes, there has been quite a lot of change, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And do you think it's going to change more over the next 10 years? I mean, you mentioned obviously there's tech involved, and then any drastic changes you think in the next 10
Ha,
years?
will it change? I think yes. But the thing is that, especially like when we talk about digitalization, I do not like this image that, let's say, in 10 years from now, The business will be done someone in an office with maybe 10 different computer screens and filling out all different types of platforms or whatnot. But maybe that is a way our industry might be looking like going forward in time.
And there could be
And
robots. It could be robots and drones delivering our scrap over our fences now. So
if you look at this trend of it's no longer a trend because it's already has been visually there since probably the last 10 years. But consolidation, I don't think that tomorrow we wake up and we all will have small independent foundries, mills, yards. I don't think that that will disappear. I think with some of the requirements asked by, let's say, governmental authorities or other interests, this trend will facilitate or will be facilitated even further. And of course, a corporate organization works completely differently than a small independent or a medium-sized independent group of companies. One of the things that I always liked about our business is it's a people-driven business, and I've been a big supporter of that idea.
yeah,
That's also one of the reasons why I like this business. Um, but I do believe that maybe not in 10 years, but at one point in time, our business will look differently. And
yeah,
then in 10
absolutely.
years from now, Stuart, I'm 50. I will be 58. Maybe it's time to
Go surfing.
go
Go
surfing somewhere.
surfing, and
Yep,
yeah, absolutely, mate.
yep,
Come to
yep.
New Zealand. There's some great surf spots here.
I know.
And this is an interesting one. I wanted to ask you about who you'd be keeping an eye on. So, who are the inspiring people in the industry at the moment? We see a lot on social media, and you're based in Europe, but we see a lot of the Americans on social media. So you know you've got Brett Eckert, who's really inspiring, super inspiring and motivating on his posts and his social media. You've got John Sacco, who's come out with Repurpose, which is incredible for the industry as a whole. We've obviously got people like George Adams that you'd be crazy not to follow what he's up to. So you've got a lot of them in America that we see. You're in Europe, so is there anybody, and it doesn't have to be Europeans, but is anybody that you see that you're keeping an eye on over the next few years?
I must say that and although we are basically competitors, but I must applaud my competitor Uwe Schmidt from the Austrian company Brixlech for how he has been active like on a platform like LinkedIn, for instance, always in a consistent way and basically shaping a little bit how the industry actually promotes or talks about its activities on a social media platform like LinkedIn, for instance. I think he was one of
Yeah.
the first, at least on the consumer side. He has been doing that in a very consistent manner. And for me, that was someone that I started following also. Well, we know each other from the past, but I think he's doing a great job actually speaking for our industry. You know that by going to meetings like BIR, for instance, um, Murat, a friendly contact, has always been
Yeah.
very loud in voicing that we should talk more about our recycling activities, what we do, show the people. I think linking that with what has been doing for the industry, I think that is something that I can applaud. Of course, I also have to applaud ourselves, mainly on the technical side, how we have innovated, fine-tuned, tweaked our processes to be able to cope and deal with the complexity of the materials that are being generated from all over the world. I don't really like to say it, but because it sounds like a cheap marketing pitch, but it's literally part of our DNA. I can say that what we have done in the Beer and Berango plants, for instance, but also at the Lunen or the Hamburg facility, also what we're doing in the Olen plant in Belgium, and actually the 7 plant that we're building in Richmond, we try to come up with new technical solutions. And there aren't that many around that basically come up with these types of innovative work. So there I would like to say, like, watch out for us. Uh,
Yeah,
um,
agreed.
if I can use this platform for that, Stuart.
Absolutely, yeah. Aurubis is an incredible company doing wonderful things.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I'd recommend watching or keeping an eye on Aurubis too. Before we go, I want to just ask you a couple questions just to get to know you a little bit more personally. these questions are just a final, getting to know you. So when we're at the BIR and at conferences, people can come up to you and say, "Oh, it's also my favorite, this or that." So let's just fire through some of these to get to know you a little bit.
Yep.
What's your favorite TV series or movie?
Oh, that is actually a very good question. Well, I don't watch that much television, to be honest. If I watch television, it's mainly on the plane when I'm flying in between Europe and US, for instance.
Yeah,
And I must say that I really liked this HBO documentary, The 100-Foot Wave, which was basically telling the story from Garrett McNamara and how he, together with the locals from the Portuguese fisher town Nazaré, how they started the whole thing of like big wave surfing. And I really thought that there was no one was doing this in such a way. They had to tweak the jet skis, they had to come up with techniques, and at the same time, while testing out, they were just basically risking their own lives just to be able to surf these
I
monstrous
I think I've
waves.
seen
Yeah.
it. I've got a really good friend who used to work at EMR before he moved back to South Africa and now to New Zealand, and he's into surfing. And I think he showed me that once. Yeah, it was pretty intense. Am I right? What they went through to
It's
start big wave surfing. It's crazy.
I'm gonna say, Stuart, it's incredible. I've been to
Yeah,
Nazaré myself last year simply to watch the let's say the
yeah.
fire tower or the lighthouse, and then it was not even big wave season, but just standing there, it's such a dramatical environment,
Wow.
and it's incredible. So that one I really liked the fact that they this adventurous thing combined with almost entrepreneurial
Mm.
view, like you're starting up something new. There's no equipment, figure it out yourself, tweak equipment, try, error, and then in the end it works. I really like that vibe.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
there are a couple of movies that I really like. I like Wild at Heart, David Lynch movie. What I liked about that movie was that Nicolas Cage, sailor, he was wearing this snakeskin jacket as part of his symbol for individuality and personal freedom. I really liked
Right.
that catchphrase. I liked the La Vita e Bella, the Life is Beautiful movie about
Mm.
a father that is actually sent to a concentration camp with his son.
Right.
And actually, he doesn't want his son to experience the concentration camp. So he figures out ways to amuse his son. I really like the movie. It reminds me a little bit what I did with my so my father a couple of years ago was really in bad shape, sick, and so for 2 years I together with my mom, I really took care of him. And let's say his light was slowly fading.
Dimming. Yep.
And I really tried to come up with ways to basically enjoy the last moments or make him
Mm.
enjoy the last
Mm.
moments of his life. So my father always worked at General Motors, the car
Right.
plant here in Antwerp. Always been very proud on what he did and being part of General Motors. So during one of my trips, I ended up in Detroit, and actually General Motors headquarters are also a hotel. So I had a room there. I went to their office and I got like a golf polo shirt
Yeah.
with the brand of General Motors on it. Went drove through the round tables in Chicago, and I ran into Matt Heidmeyer, a friendly contact from Louis Patmos. He looked very CEO-like. I said, like, Matt, do you want to let's take a picture together where you hand over the polo shirt to me? So I went back to well, Matt did it. I flew back to Belgium, and I said like that. I just ran into the CEO of General Motors, and they really were still aware of who you were. And I took a
Oh,
picture with
that's
the
amazing.
CEO, and he was so like I could see the lights in his eyes like
Wow.
pop up, and that reminds okay. Far from being in a concentration camp, of course,
Sure.
but I
I
like the
don't.
vibe
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
movie a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What's your favorite place to visit? You've gone to quite a few places. Where's your favorite place to visit?
Oh, I like big cities because that's good for my brain. I like the input that you get, impressions in the big mastodons of cities, New York, Chicago, Hong Kong, you name it, because I let's say Antwerp, although we like to believe that we are the center of the world. Basically, we are a small town city compared to some of the real cities, I would say. But I also like the remoteness of places like Sweden, Norway. Like in wintertime, I go out for these more extreme winter hikes where you just have your own food, drinks. You're literally there at your own risk. There's no cell phone connection, nothing. You're completely out there yourself with the food that you bring. You walk around in the snow, it's all white. If there's a snowstorm, up to you to figure it out. But the quietness, the silence, I like being away sometimes from the hustle and bustle. But if I'm away for too long, then I can
You
really
get the
enjoy
urge.
being in like big cities. Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So you've got the two extremes, right? You
Correct.
like to be either you're in a really big city or you're by yourself in the snow with
Yep,
no phone signal. It's
yep,
yeah,
yep.
that's very interesting. Do you read books? And if you do, what's your favorite book?
Ha, Stuart, you should actually ask another question. I would think you should ask me about my favorite records because actually,
I know you're a
I'm
DJ.
more into records than books. Do I read books?
Yeah.
Yes. I'd like to read biographies of people that had an impact.
Are you
Like
gonna Shoe Dog? Phil Knight, have you read that? The Nike
no, no,
story?
no.
I highly recommend that one. Sorry,
Okay.
which one were you going to tell me?
No, I would say like the recent books that I bought were like the ones about Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. I started reading in a book which is called Waves and Beaches about the dynamic between, let's say, wind, sea, and the coast.
Okay.
It's more of a philosophical approach, which I like. But there's one book that really means something to me, and that's a book that actually Murat sent me probably 3 years ago. We both are into boxing, and we always have this fun thing when we see each other like BIR should organize a boxing night between the both of us, and then obviously I would win. But when he sent me this book, it was the biography of Muhammad Ali,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant.
and he added a letter that was a period where it was with my father a bit tough, and that is a book that I have
Mm,
that means something to me. Yep,
sure.
yep.
I think you'll have Murat on definitely on Reach. You'll definitely have people can't see
It's on
that
everything,
you're a
Stuart. It's not
lot
just
taller.
reach, it's cleverness. It's like
I'll make sure in fact, I will use a clip on this on LinkedIn and make sure he comments for everybody to see. I'm excited for that. I might have to put this together actually. Live,
just
live on Born Scrappy.
just to tease him a little bit. I
Love
like
it.
him. Yeah.
But now I need to know what's your favorite record?
I will always say "Shake Your Head" by the Beastie Boys. That's my all-time
Oh,
favorite band. However, there is this one song that I always play, and that's "If I Could Only Be Sure" by Nolan Porter, which is a 70s mod soul kind of artist. And every time I play it, people they don't know the song, but people start dancing, they start laughing, and if they had a couple of drinks, then they will walk up to me and they will ask me like, "Who's this guy? What are you playing?" And it's every time it's the only record when I play it, then it has like a very positive reaction or let's say crowd response. I'm gonna
mm.
say, yeah.
It's almost midnight here, but as soon as we finish this, I'll go and get it on Spotify and go and have a listen.
I think you will
Definitely.
like it. I hope
Yeah, no,
that you will like
no,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Let's finish off with a final quote. Have you got one? A favorite quote?
A quote, I'm gonna say like dream big. It's something that was written on one of the surfboards from the big wave surfers in Nazare, but it's also something that I've always done like myself with big dreams. If you don't set goals, then it can wear on you because you dream and nothing. It doesn't translate into something that you can experience. But if you set goals and you have the consistency and commitment, then you can make and try to at least achieve some of those dreams. And I've done that. Some of the dreams that I had over the last 23 years, I've been able to fulfill a lot of them. So I would simply say dream big. And if I can get an extra second for a second quote, Stuart,
Sure.
then I
Absolutely.
would simply say it's a quote that I found on the walls at the Ali Museum in Louisville, and that's simply find greatness within.
Hmm.
And I
Beautiful,
really
man.
like that quote, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, those are two great ones. I like them. On the first one, to me, you've got to go big. You dream big. You go as hard as you possibly can. You've only got one opportunity. Settling to me isn't an option. Just settling with what happens. And I also manifest. I believe in manifesting and writing things down and saying, this is where I want to be. This is what my dream is. I picture what it's going to look like in 5 years or 10 years or 30 years. And I work my way all the way back to today. And I go, what are my steps to get me there? So if this is my goal and my dream for 10 years' time, if I work my way back through the steps, then I know what I have to do tomorrow,
Yep.
right? And as long as I'm on the right trajectory the whole way, yeah, even if, they say if you aim for the stars and you miss it and you hit the clouds, well, you've still done really well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Jurgen, thanks so much, mate. I've really appreciated the chat today. It's great catching up with you again. I'll see you, I'm sure, in Abu Dhabi in the next month or two.
Yep.
So thanks for being a part of this. I've really enjoyed it.
No, my pleasure, Stuart. Thank you very much.